All right, welcome everybody. You are tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show here on WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And Sebastian, will you take it away, sir? Here's Sebastian Messer playing live in the studio. Awesome. Thank you, Bass. That was really cool, man. And everybody, thank you for tuning in today. This is the second hour, and I'm really delighted and excited that my special guest, John Palisano, can hang out with us for this next hour. So welcome back, John. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah. So if you missed the first hour, y'all, don't worry. You can go back to any of your podcast apps that you like and just look for the Adam Messer Show and put in John Palisano's name. If you're just now tuning in, John Palisano is an author and a musician. He is the current sitting president for the Horror Writer Association group. And the last hour we talked a lot about music, and we started diving in deep about storytelling and like how you got into storytelling. So you started off writing stories in childhood, and you wrote your first short novel at 13. Used to carry around a notebook with you everywhere you went, writing songs and story ideas and writing and all that. And even shared with us about like having to write up these morning announcements or whatever for your principal. To get music privileges or get out of trouble privileges type thing. And so that's pretty cool, man. So like I want to kind of dig in, like kind of pick up where we left off with the last hour. So you were in your early adulthood, writing and playing music. So where did it go next? I mean, like when you're young adulthood and all, and how did it kind of progress from there?
Right. Well, to go to your earlier question, like when did I want to start publishing? It kind of something that happened gradually over the years. I mean, I was working like you in like the school paper and, selling little shorts to, little fanzines and little things at school and putting out my, mimeographing my own little stories. And it just progressed. And when I was in high school, I was sending, stories out to lit magazines and stuff. I got into a couple things, smaller little affairs. But it really kicked in college, of course, because I think the maturity level, naturally, increased enough where my work started getting noticed. And I think the very first, I was selling a bunch of art. I was doing a lot of articles. During college, I was selling to like film magazines and stuff like that. And I won a couple of screenplay contests. I won the Leighton Image Award for a script.
Oh, wow.
And and I won the John H. Edmund Award in my freshman year for so it was more like academia sort of things at that time, but it was starting to branch into more like genre fiction. I mean, I've always loved, my stuff's always been dark and mostly horror, like 90% of it. And I was finally getting some traction with those kinds of stories, and with screenplays specifically. I was doing a great job with that sort of work, and it just all snowballed from there after college too. It just little by little. I mean, this was the age before It wasn't too long ago where if you sent something, they would not take electronic submissions, and you had to send it by paper, and it was a much slower process.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's something too. I think is really crazy because that trope or whatever you want to call it of, hey,
Duotrope.
yeah, you're out there with your script, and not you personally, but the people are out there that, like, work in a restaurant or a coffee shop or something like that, and they're like, hey, there's so and so, the big movie director. I want to, could you take this for me, sir? Or um, I mean, that's actually how it was done before, and then today, it's almost it's almost like the underground, like it's harder to get your material or your work in front of people, but in a way too, it's also a lot more accessible to get your work out in front of people. I think publishing and getting published, it's different. It's different now because it's almost like with the internet, everybody can publish, and that's the beauty of it. And then it's also everybody can publish, and
Yeah.
So there's so many things out there. There's not just 31 flavors of ice cream anymore. You know what I mean? And so I think we're, with your coming of age with the writing and all, being able to see both sides of that world. Being able to see like how they, because I have a friend that I remember when I was a kid too. We had the mimeograph papers and stuff, and I have a friend, Terry Dremel. He's an independent comic producer of Steve Range Comics, and I love it because it's like Mad Comics, and he did his first ones in this like 75, 76, and he put them out on mimeograph paper,
Yeah.
and he was publishing himself, and I think it's just so cool because it just shows if you have that tenacity and you have that, like, hey, I want to do this, technology is going to change. It doesn't matter what, I mean, like these smartphones, they weren't even here 15 years ago,
Right.
what's going to be the next 15 years? What's going to, how is the technology going to change? How are we going to consume this, content? How are we going to produce the content? It's going to change. And I think it's really cool because storytelling, no matter what you do, it still goes back to, hey, I've got this idea and I want to put it together and make it a complete thing. And then I'm going to put it out there for the world to see. And that takes a lot of courage. I think it takes a whole lot of courage to do that. And I really think it's cool that, that you got into storytelling and you got into filmmaking, and so.
Yeah. And I think going back to that, even way before you and I mean, Lovecraft was sending to, micro presses and self-published kind of presses. And even if you go back to the time of Dickens and stuff, a lot of the stuff that crowd were doing, they were, sending things to newspapers to print.
They were selling to market. I mean, like, people complain about that all the time, but that's these classics. They were selling to market. They were selling stories that they want. Like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle disliked his character Sherlock Holmes so much that he killed him off, but he was selling to market, and the audience demanded that he bring it back, and Sherlock Holmes came back because he was selling to market. And I think that's something that people don't, like, they don't think about. Like, but like for me, Frankenstein was a sci-fi book because there was a lot of technology in there, for its time. And then Dracula, was written like in a modern time. We think of it as like Victorian because it was written in that time period. But if Bram Stoker were alive today, which I feel like we have a good example with Dacre Stoker, it would be, like Dracula would be, he would be a modern person. He wouldn't be, it wouldn't be set, 5,000 years ago or whatever, or 500 years ago, or 50 years. It would be set in today's world because it's, appealing to people today. And that's who they were writing to then. They weren't writing to people in the past. They weren't writing about classics and stuff like that. So I don't know, man. I just think it's cool though. Because like technology changes, but storytelling, it just, good story is going to persist, no matter what with time.
Well, and that's the bottom line, is the story has to be good and connect with people. And if it doesn't do that, it doesn't matter if it's on an iPhone or a Xerox piece of paper or an old receipt. It needs to be something that's compelling.
Yeah.
And you still need to have that ability. And that's one of the things that the technology's there. And yeah, we have more technology in our iPhones than the Beatles had recording their records. But
Or the
you
people
know,
launching the NASA Apollo 13. In
right?
our phone we've got more technology than the entirety of NASA. Then
Yeah, easily. But what are you going to do? You still have to know what to do with it. You still have to
right,
have that
right,
seed of that germ of creation.
yeah.
And that's the bottom line. The tools make it a lot easier, and that's great. And but knowing story is really still paramount. And I think that that's still applicable, because no matter what, writers still need to write. It does. If you're on a computer, you're on a phone, or you're still using a 3-ring notebook, whatever you want to do, you still have to be able to write, and write in a way that connects with people. And
I actually,
that's
to
yeah,
parlay on your point there, I
yeah,
actually know a couple of best-selling authors I've had on the show that they use an old school notebook, like those composition notebooks,
great.
and they write their entire first draft on a in a notebook. They don't use a computer or anything like that. Their first draft is completely handwritten, and these are folks that are perennial bestsellers. You know, and
And
I think it really, the medium doesn't matter so much as like the storytelling.
yeah, yeah, whatever gets it from brain to page, is really up to you. Whatever you're comfortable with, making that transcription, um, is it just works for you, and just embrace it and don't worry about it. And a lot of folks get caught up in the technology and what program are you using? Are you using this one? Is it better? Is it worse?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how many words are you doing a day and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff? And
And it's
you
like,
know,
hey, are you telling the story? If you're not writing,
right,
get writing. That doesn't matter
right,
what you use. Get to writing.
right. And I think that can be valuable, because like, uh, if we use music as a parallel, like we've been doing this conversation. When you're first learning music, you're learning scales, and you're learning repetition, or you're learning, you know, how many verses do I need to make a 3-minute song? And you learn those things, and there are certain numeric structures to that. But there comes a point where that kind of becomes second nature. So I think that I get it, like, especially, and if you're writing to market again, you need to know, I need 50 chapters, that each one needs to be around this length. That's kind of the expectation, so it can be valuable. And you
Yeah.
kind of develop that as kind of a sense memory kind of thing over time. But on the flip side, if it can also be damaging, because people sometimes, I need this, every chapter has to be 1,500 words, so I got to keep writing this. And sometimes the chapters only needs to be 500 words,
Yeah.
but they feel like, oh, I'm not doing it right if I'm doing it wrong. So there's a yin and yang to all of it, which is,
Well,
and I
talking about youth, writing in youth, I had, and you just made me think of this, John. I haven't thought about this since I was a kid. We had a principal, and his name was Dr. Sharp. There was a Mr. Sharp, and there was a Dr. Sharp. There were two different principals at our elementary school, which I thought was kind of crazy.
wow,
But they're not related. They weren't related or anything like that. One was Mr. Sharp. He was my first principal, and then we had Dr. Sharp, which was the principal came in like my 6th grade year or whatever. But Dr. Sharp came into our,
aliens,
yeah, it's crazy. Well, he came into our class, and it was English, and we were talking about writing, and we were talking about, and I didn't know it at the time, but we were talking about, the command of the English language with, the way that we write. And he brought up the idea of, can you make a complete sentence with one word? And the answer is yes, you can. And he gave us an example of cry. Cry. The word cry. And I thought about that, like, just now. I was just thinking about when you were talking about that. I was just thinking about that lesson that we had. He was up there talking to us about how powerful one word can be
yeah,
when you're telling a story.
absolutely,
And when you're talking about with the chapter, having the compulsory, formulaic 1,500 words, you can also do it in 500. You know, whatever moves the story forward and whatever the story needs, right? I mean,
yeah,
like, I think people sometimes forget, and I feel like that's where you're going with this. But I think sometimes people forget, like, you have to know and understand the structure, but you also have to understand when the story needs something that's outside of that, and I think sometimes people, they want to break the rules before they understand them, and because
Sure.
they're trying to be different, they're trying to be edgy or whatever. It's like, well, you know you could be edgy, but not too many people are going to enjoy a hot dog flavored ice cream. You know what I mean? They're going to enjoy
Sure.
hot dogs as hot dogs, and they're going to enjoy ice cream as ice cream, but they're not going to enjoy a hot dog flavored ice cream.
Probably not.
You know what I mean? Like, that's,
Good now.
yeah, that's the kind of example I think of when I see somebody that's trying to do something like, "Oh, you never seen this story before. You never heard this story before." I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I probably might have. I mean, like, since people have been writing stories, I might not have seen that character and might not have seen that combination. But, I mean, for us to create something new that's completely original and never before seen, it's like people want the familiar, but they want something new and different. Like we, with music, I don't really understand music, but I know that there are notes. I know that you play a combination of notes to make, a melody. You're not creating new notes. You know what I mean? You're using a system that's already established and there. Just like with us, we're not, I mean, like Shakespeare created a bunch of new words, but typically most of the authors I know, they're not writing and creating new words to, relay their story. You know what I mean?
I do.
So,
And I agree completely. I think that what you're getting to is voice.
yeah,
And
that's exactly it.
yeah,
People want to hear you as John Palisano, tell your story or play your music.
hopefully.
They want to hear that. They like when people read my stuff or listen to me on the radio, they want to hear me because they like listening to me or like reading my stuff. They want that different voice. That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah, and I think that's a question I get asked a lot is how is so and so popular they can't write, or this song sucks. I don't know why people like this, that, or the other artist. But it's really about with authors. It's about somebody likes that author's voice. They may not be telling a brand new story that's never been told before, but there's something about their voice that draws the reader in. And that's why, I don't want to name names of because I don't like doing that. But I think that's why some of these books are successful. It's not because they can, oh boy, can they write a sentence?
Yeah.
That's never really been what sold stories.
Right.
It's all about, do they like that? Do they feel this storytelling voice speaks to them? And some speak to a lot of people out there and some don't. And some speak to a small contingent of people. And I think that's really, and same with music.
Mm-hmm.
You say, oh, this song is it's such a boring song, or it's so basic, the song or whatever. Well, for some reason it connects. And if nobody had ever heard A Whole Lot of Love and I recorded it with my band, would it be a hit?
They did that movie a couple years ago about the Beatles. Like, there was only one person that had ever known about the Beatles, and
Yeah.
It's called Yesterday.
Yesterday. Thank you, Sebastian.
Yeah.
And they had that same kind of thing. Like, well, wait a minute, that still would have been a great song. Whole Lot of Love. Yeah, I mean, like if you were the first person to ever play it, that song would have still been great. You know what I mean?
Maybe. But what if my particular vibe wasn't suited to it when I recorded it?
That's true too. Good
what
point,
if
John.
when I what if when I recorded it, it just didn't quite gel the way those four guys gelled when they did it.
That's so
Even
true.
it's the same song. I mean, we play I play in you see a cover band, you see a band in a club covering something, and they're playing the same notes, the singer's saying the same thing, but it doesn't sound
just doesn't
quite,
hit the
there's
right.
something off.
Yeah, it just doesn't hit
Something
right.
missing. There's some weird thing that's missing in there, and I think that weird missing thing is the individualistic voices.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of one of the things that certain authors have, because we hear another thing with books is, hey, this bestseller is just like 10 other stories, and it's literally almost the same story. If you put it A to B and it has this kind of character and this happens here and that happens there, but there was something different about this new voice that told that connected with people at that point in time. It's a really weird and intangible phenomena, and I think that that's one of the things that I always urge on people. I just always like to tell new writers. They say, I don't know if this, that, or the other thing, if I have it. I say, well, you know what? If you wrote The Shining, it would be a very different book than Stephen King's. And they go, oh yeah, probably. I would probably make some different see, and there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you had the exact same outline and you knew it and you've seen the movie, and right now, Adam, if you wrote The Shining without looking at King's book, and you know the story, and you can use everything's canon, whatever you want to use, it would still be a very different book than King's book.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Even though even the same characters and the same beats and a lot of the same lines you'd remember, and I think that comes down to we're all individuals.
I agree with you completely. I think it's so crazy talk about storytelling and that kind of thing, because we all have our own interpretations and voice and memories, and like you were talking about earlier about music and those dendrites being created when you strike, like you're making a noise with your finger, like
Yep.
I'm tapping on this little desk and you can hear you can hear it doing a beat in the background.
Yeah.
I think when we're doing the same kind of things, it doesn't matter if we're repeating it or whatever, it's going to be different just because we're not the same person. Even twins, triplets or whatever, that they're as close to being, genetically the same as anything, they're going to be different,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. I think that's what, like you said, the voice, I think that is a big, like that is really I feel like the best advice that, that I've heard in a long time, because with writing, it is, I joke around, John, but I joke around that, writing is some of the hardest work for some of the least amount of pay I've ever done of any job as an adult. And I've been working full time almost 30 years. And,
Without a doubt.
but it's also one of the most rewarding,
Yeah.
and it's one of the most satisfying. For example, with my little publishing company, we just published a book this last Friday, and the work that I put into that, working with the author and publishing, and it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, but it was so satisfying and gratifying to have this thing out there in the world and saying, hey, look, we did this thing. You know what I mean? I didn't even write the story, but being part of that publishing process was so much fun, and saying, hey, we brought this book to light so that it can be out there in the world and people can read it and enjoy it, or not enjoy it if they don't. Some people might not like it. It might not be for them, but I feel like that is such a wonderful thing. And you're right. If I were to write The Shining, it would be a completely different story than what Stephen King wrote.
Yeah. It would feel different. It would read different. The rhythms would be different in places.
It'd be all work and no play, and makes Adam a dull boy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something really important for writers to remember and to embrace.
Mm-hmm.
Because the second question is, okay, that's great, dude. I'm individualistic, so you're saying it's all about voice. How do I find my voice? And just like your mentor that came to school, there's a one word answer for that, and it's listen.
Mm-hmm.
Listen for your voice.
Yeah.
Don't listen to anybody else. Just listen to your voice. When you're sitting down to create something, be yourself. Do what you want to do. Don't worry about, well, this book's doing good, or this person gave me feedback for this and I shouldn't do this. Push all that aside and just listen to your own voice.
John, I've got a personal question to ask you about my writing.
Sure.
I'm a new writer still. I consider myself to be a new writer. I as far as fiction, even like with public journalism, I've only been doing it for 7 years, and so I'm still. I feel like I'm still new. I mean, like I'm not like green, but I'm still very, very much raw with it. And one of the things that I find with my writing, and this is what I want to ask you, with my own writing, I'll have like a lot of flair and a lot of energy, just go when it comes to drafting, getting that first draft done. But when it comes to editing, I feel like it's such a chore, right? And I haven't found my balance yet of being excited about the editing process of the story. And I was just wondering because, like, that's where I know that's where you polish it up the first time. You're writing it for yourself, and second, everything after the first draft, that you're writing is for the audience and all. But I just don't find a lot of passion with that. I just don't. I mean, I feel like it's, when I'm editing for somebody else, no problem. When I'm working on somebody else's stuff and I'm editing, no problem. But when it comes to my own, I just feel like it's such a chore.
Well, editing, first of all, editing your own work is, it's not usually the most pleasant experience. And it also, you don't have that subjectivity in a lot of cases to really do, the editing that probably you may feel it needs. But the flip side of that is maybe it doesn't need as much editing as you think that you can, that you need to do. And maybe that's something that's comes with more experience down the road. For me, one of the big revelations that I had, because I had a similar problem. I would do 7 drafts and it always felt like a slog, of a book. And I was like, oh man. One of the best bits of advice I ever got was I read a quote from Joe Lansdale, and he said that what he does is at the end of the day, or at the beginning of his second day of writing, he writes the first day, for example. The second day, he goes back and cleans up the first day and then goes forward. So by the time he gets to the end of the book, he's on second draft. And there's a lot of benefits to that because if there is a story issue or there's a story hole or something, you catch it then. Instead of just barreling through, you're kind of go, oh, I forgot that part line there, or then you remember everybody's names. You remember, a character name kind of changed from Drew to Dave or something like that. You catch a lot of little things like that later will drive you crazy when you're trying to edit an entire novel. And
I like that. I actually have never heard of that and never thought about doing that, but I think that would work because, like, with writing the articles, I can self edit all day long before I send it over to my editor. Like I'll go through it 3 or 4 or 5 times, with no problem at all. But I've never been able to really get behind wanting to edit my own stuff for fiction, and that I love that method. Has it been working for you pretty good?
I've been using it for over 10 years, and,
Oh, wow.
and I still do it even with short stories.
Wow.
And the trick is I don't go back and really edit. I don't go edit the entire book before I start the next day. I just go over the previous session's work, maybe a little back and forth.
Well, that's not. I mean, like on an average day, I would write 500 words, 1,000 words. Sometimes, maybe like on a really good day, like 2 to 3,000 words. But on average, maybe 800 to 1,000 words, right? And so that's very manageable to be able to go back and kind of give it like a little dust off the next day before writing, and it does give you kind of I could see. I mean, I haven't tried it yet, but I could see how it could put you in that mindset again. Like like you're picking up from the day before. You got to stretch and warm up.
Exactly, it's a warm up, exactly, and it's not an overwhelming amount of editing, and really at any point if you're editing, it should just be for typos and overall grammatical things, maybe clarifying things.
Yeah.
If you're trying to edit for voice, then I think that's a whole nother conversation. If you're like, I don't like my voice,
it's not that I haven't had that problem so much. It's just more like I have done that where like I had a character named Damien and I was calling him Darian, and like halfway through I had called him I switched over to Darian for some reason.
Okay.
And I was like, wait a minute, I thought this guy's name was Damien, and it was like, well, what did I originally call him? And I had to go back to the second book because it was in the third book of the series. And I had to go back to the second book, and I was like, oh, it was Damien, but why am I I guess it was just one of those mental, whatever. So
and you're like, find and replace is my new best friend.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And then the other thing too is like I picked up that Grammarly app, and for Word, and I was using that, and it when we've got to do the station break, but when you use different colloquial dialects, like I like to use a lot of Southern colloquialisms and dialects and stuff, and Grammarly does not really like that.
Yeah, smoke comes out of its ears when you try to do that.
They're like, "This is improper English. You cannot use this." I'm like, "Yes, I will. Do not ask me to change it. Do not ask me to change I'm a to I am. Don't ask me again, Grammarly." So, hold on for a second here. We're gonna do station break. Be back in about 2 minutes, y'all.
A portion of WRUU Savannah Soundings programming is provided by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have available online ordering and curbside delivery, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
Do you own a small business? Do you want to get your message out to a dedicated, loyal, and active audience? Then make WRUU part of your company's marketing strategy. Our listeners aren't just passively listening to us in the background. When your company underwrites with WRUU, you're getting their attention. And you're also supporting Savannah's only community radio station. It's an act of both self-interest and community spirit. Connect your brand with WRUU's passion, spunk, and hyper-local focus by choosing an underwriting package that fits your company's budget. Email underwriting@wruu.org for more information. Thank you.
The Live Oak Public Library System offers local residents access to hundreds of thousands of movies, television programs, albums, audiobooks, ebooks, and digital comic books for free on your streaming television and mobile devices through the Hoopla app. Supported devices include Roku, Fire, Apple TV, iPhone, and Android, among others. The selection is vast. All you'll need is your library card. Find the Hoopla app on your device and more information at liveoakpl.org.
This portion of WRUU's programming is brought to you by listeners and by the 2021 Savannah Jazz Festival. Due to the moratorium on large outdoor events in Savannah, the Savannah Jazz Festival has been moved to Savannah Station. Admission will continue to be free, but a lottery will be conducted for tickets. Ranky Tanky is...
All right, everybody, we're back here in the studio. This is the Adam Messer Show, and I'm your host, Adam Messer, here with my special guest, John Palisano. And John, so we're talking about storytelling, and we were just kind of talking about editing, and I love you said that you've been doing that for 10 years now, where you'll go back and dust off the day before's work. How did that change your writing process for getting to, because you said you were doing like 7 or 8 drafts, and how did that change your writing process? Because you've been writing since you were a kid, and then you changed that up like 10 years ago. How did that change for you, and how's that been working for you for the last with your storytelling and all?
Well, it's done wonders, because it makes you really think of the story, because you're not just editing mechanically, you're also rethinking the story every day, and it kind of makes you get the story in your head before you start writing. So the continuity is better, the flow is better, the rhythms kind of tie up better, and I think that method really was what allowed me to really sell my first books. It really made the difference in the overall writing, because some of the earlier novels were a little flawed, because I would just barrel through, and then I would barrel through the edits.
Yeah. I think that changes because that's the problem that I have with editing my stuff. Like I was saying, like it feels like a grind, and but working with other people and working with their like I spent 30 hours on working on formatting and editing this one draft, and that's I'm not saying that that's a lot of time, but for their second book, it was I spent like maybe 10 hours, with everything, and the first one was just because it was an older book, and but even that 30 hours, it didn't feel like I was like, if I was spending 30 hours on my own book, it would felt like a grind, you know?
Right. Well, and I think doing it in realistic chunks and not feeling like you have to just go from, chronologically all at once really helps. And editing as you go, it also can give you some confidence because what you're doing is tight. Like your grammar and your spelling and everything is tight as you go. So you have that going for you, which is really helpful. And then you really start to know the story because it forces you to kind of reread the last chapter you did. And sometimes you go, oh, you know what? While I was thinking of that last night, this wasn't working quite right. I thought of a better way to do this chapter. And sometimes you'll go back to yesterday's chapter and rewrite it. And you go, you know what? This wasn't, I could see this is branching into something that's not going to work. And sometimes you make those catches that you wouldn't catch if you're barreling through and it's good advice when you're first writing books, just get to the end. Because psychologically something happens in your first writing novels, getting to the end is really important and not going back and fine tuning too much. Because you'll go back and fine tune forever and never get done. But after you've written a couple, it really does. It makes a lot more sense because you can do it, and you kind of learn from your first projects what went wrong, what went right. So you have that at the back of your mind. So when you're editing as you go, you kind of realize, well, hey, I'm doing that same thing I always do, and I went off on a story tangent here that's not going to pay off the way I want, but I know if I did B instead of A here, I know that could be better. So those kind of opportunities open up when you do that too. So it's not just mechanical editing, there's also some developmental editing that goes along with it too, which is kind of a neat side effect. You kind of take a breath for a day and think and go back before you jump back in the race. And just that little breath can make a big difference.
I think that's great advice. Because just everybody, this is a crazy thing, but John and I've never talked before today. We've messaged back and forth, but we've never talked on the phone or anything like that. And I think it's so cool that you're talking about that because it's so realistic. I think people kind of mysticize or romanticize the whole writing process.
Sure.
And then they look at it and they don't see the work that goes into it per se. They see what the end result is or whatever, and they basically they kind of get caught up, lost in the I don't want to say lost in translation, but they kind of get lost in the the romanticized version of like, oh well, I'm just gonna write this and it's gonna be blah 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 and it's gonna be the next best selling book and blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, I hope that works out for you. Because it can happen. There's that potential.
Yeah, sure.
And like I was talking to a person the other day, and they were like, well, blah, 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 and the same kind of thing with the romanticized thing. I was like, yes, it definitely is a potential outcome. Just like buying a scratch off for the lottery ticket, you have a potential to win that $1 million that's on the front. More than likely, you're going to win 10 or 20 bucks if you win anything. That's the realistic thing, but there's always that potential, and I was telling the person the other day, I was like, I try to be more realistic with my writing. I don't expect it to be a best-selling book. I would love, don't get me wrong, I would love to be self-sufficient and self-supportive with my writing. But realistically, I know that I have to fight for every reader that I get. I know I have to fight for every story that I finish and publish. I know that I have to fight for every, everything that I'm doing. It's, I have to work at it. Nobody's going to do the work for me. Nobody's going to give it to me, and nobody's going to be like, hey, we just really like you a whole lot, Adam Messer, and we just want to publish you, and we're going to give you this, $1 million advance. Not going to happen,
Well, like you said, anything is possible, but I think that the bottom line with any of the creative arts is you have to really love it.
Right.
And you have to put in the woodshedding time. Because otherwise, even if you get that break, you're going to get through the door and you're going to have that shot, and then people are going to go, oh, and that'll be that, you know?
Yeah, like you were saying
And
earlier about like some people who are very wild or wildly popular, they might not be the best writer, or they might not have the best story, but people like their voice, or they like what they're putting out there. And I mean, I hate to say this, but seeing some of the stuff that's out there, I see it and then I wonder like, why? How did that get published, or how did that get produced, or how did they make that movie? I mean, people always want to complain about like a bad movie or whatever, right? It's like,
right.
how did it get beyond all of the stages of, me and a multi-million-dollar budget, two, three, $400 million, and then it comes out as just a complete,
Well, a movie's a totally different animal than a novel. From my experience in the film industry, a lot could go wrong to recast, that the whole feel of a movie up till post-production. And there's so many different variables at play. It's a miracle that any come out great, just because it's like fighting a war every time you make a film, one of those, any movie.
Yeah.
And there's just so many intangible things that have to kind of come together almost by magic to make those things kind of really work. And one thing in film school I learned was, think of the worst movie you've seen, and imagine the script, and if it had a different set of circumstances in production, a different cast, director, art director, yada yada, could it have been made into a great film? And most of the time we thought, oh man, so that the horror film that we saw that we thought sucked, but if Wes Craven directed it and he had Johnny Depp in it, oh man. And then you go, what if Tim Burton liked it? Oh my God, that would have been amazing. And then you're like, oh, but Tim Burton would have $100 million, and these poor folks had 700 grand,
yeah,
or something.
The other day I saw something about, you remember the John Candy, The Great Outdoors?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a classic comedy movie. People look back and they think, oh man, it's a great John Candy comedy movie. Well, when it came out, it was a box office flop and it had bad reviews. It was only until after it was released on home video that people started appreciating it as a movie, and I think that's what I think of talking about like books, just like you said earlier. If I were to write The Shining, it would not be a Stephen King novel. It would not be the same book, and yeah, and I feel like that creativity is so subjective. It's so subjective that we
very much so.
We might think of something as being, kind of a stinker today, but, in a different time or different circumstances, the audience might appreciate it differently,
Yeah. And people love and hate exactly the same things all the time. And it's just the way it is, and that's fine. People hate The Shining, people hate, Alien. They hate movies that are considered classics.
Well, I've got a friend of mine named Michael Alcott. He's a comedian named Redbone, but he was also in that oh my gosh, Rob Zombie. He was the chicken guy from the Rob Zombie movie.
Oh wow, okay.
I can't remember what the name of that movie was.
House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah, he was the guy. I don't want to say, I can't say it on air, but he was the chicken guy on that movie. Okay, so anyway, I saw somebody do a clip of him on TikTok, and he was doing a comedy thing, and I was like, man, like in certain realms he's known for comedy, and other realms he's known for his acting. And like when we were just talking just now, like there's certain people that would never watch a Rob Zombie horror movie, and there are other people that they just absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things about storytelling, and that we're also individualistic. That we have common tastes, but my book, if I put it out there are going to be people that are going to like it. There are going to be people that don't like it.
Sure.
But I feel like what you were saying earlier about, your voice, and I feel like being true to your voice is so important. I mean, like, that's amazing. I feel like when you're talking earlier about, you have to listen to yourself, you have to listen to your voice. because people ask that same question, like, how do I find my passion? How do I find my purpose in life? How do I find, what am I supposed to be doing in life?
Right.
You see that all the time. People are like, they're searching because there aren't, like when I was a kid, it was like, hey, this is what you should do, and da 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 da, and it was pretty clear cut path that they said you should do it, and this would guarantee like you could be successful or you could do this or whatever. Today, no, not so much.
Yeah, all bets are off now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that, like, they talk about disrupting industries. The publishing industry. I was talking to somebody earlier today. We live in a time that we're so blessed to be able, like 30 years ago, we would not have been able to publish our own books. We would not have been able to publish our own music, put it out there to the world, movies, you name it. Any kind of entertainment that you want to produce and create and put it out there, you can do that today. 30 years ago, man, like
but it was expensive and the quality wasn't great.
Right? I mean, like I know back in the day, people were doing like bootleg VHS movies and stuff, and they were like I knew back in the day, man, people that were trunk selling music because they would put it on CDs that they burned themselves or tapes that they burned, they made themselves, and they were trunk selling. Like, they go out to concerts or they go out to gas stations, they were out there selling it by the trunk.
Yeah.
And
bless their heart for doing that. That's a rough gig, man.
I mean, but you talk about believing in yourself.
Yeah.
And having that voice and say, hey, you know what? I put something together that I'm proud of, and I want to share that with the world.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. I was one of those people. I'm still feel like I'm one of those people.
I think so too, man. I mean, like I see that, and folks, John's the president of the Horror Writers Association. There are I think like 15 or 1,600 active members or something like that. And I know that the Facebook group's got like 30,000 people or something like that. It's something crazy in it. But there are people from all over the world. And, the organization itself I feel like it's a wonderful organization. I joined it a couple years ago, and I feel like it's been, a really great organization. There are a lot of professional people out there who are working, and also trying to share, like the stuff that you've been sharing today, to help other people out, because I feel like with books and storytelling and writing and things like that, I feel like it's one of those things where there's a lot of stuff out there, but also there's a lot of room as well. I mean, there's who's going to be the next Stephen King, or who's going to be the next, J.R.R. Tolkien, who's going to be the next person doing those kind of things, sharing that, I mean, like these folks, I mean, Tolkien, what he put The Hobbit out in the 30s, his books have sold a ton of books in the last 75, 80, 100 years or whatever, almost 100 years. Who's going to be the next, the next J.R.R. Tolkien? Probably hasn't even been born yet,
Yeah, we don't even know. We probably won't know for decades afterward.
Yeah.
So, again, it goes back to just doing it because you love it, and seeing, making sure you can sleep at night, knowing that you told the stories you wanted to tell the way you wanted to tell them. And I think the rest is all just, up to kind of chance and up to luck, and and kind of out of your hands in a lot of ways, unless there's some secret cabals or something going on. But as far as I can tell, it's, the luck of the draw. But
well, back in the day, the ancient Greeks used to think that a muse was actually like a spirit.
Oh.
And they used to think like you would be visited by your muse that was like this spirit that would come, give you some kind of inspiration to do, something creative or whatever. And like today, well, obviously most of us don't believe in that kind of stuff, but when you think about it, like you said, some of it's just out of your hands. I mean, like, have you ever had a story idea come to you, John, and you're like, I don't even know where that came from?
Oh, almost all of them.
And I mean, like, it's just something like, can't explain it, but it's there.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had very extremely vivid, dreams.
Me too.
And with people I've never met and situations I've never been in, and I just write them down and expand them, and all the time. Yeah. And songs, I get songs. I dream entire songs sometimes with
Oh,
lyrics, and I
wow.
write them out, and, probably because I don't have any time during the day. My brain says, okay, now it's song time when you're asleep. But anyway.
Oh my gosh, we got a couple minutes left on this show, but
All right.
I love that you just said that because during the day you don't really have time. I feel like, and I want to ask your opinion on this, but I feel like when you're writing and you want to write, not you personally, but just you in general for people, if a person wants to write,
Yeah.
they have to dedicate time to doing that. They have to say, hey, I'm going to set aside this time and use that time for writing.
Yeah. And if you know what, if you love it and you want to do it, you will find the time somewhere, some way. Just like if you really want a Sonic burger, you're going to find a way to get that thing at some point soon. You know,
Like right
it's
after the
going
show.
to No, that's not a plug for them. I'm just
No, I'm just saying, like I know what you mean. It's like, hey, I was telling Sebastian this afternoon I want to get a cheeseburger.
Oh, how funny.
But yeah, no, I think it's so cool because you got that's one thing I hear time and time again, and I believe for myself is that don't wait to be inspired, do the work to be inspired, become inspired.
Yeah, bring it like me. Bring a notebook with you, or everybody's got a phone with a writing app on it. I mean,
Right.
when you're waiting for your kids or something in the doctor's office, instead of checking Facebook for the 19th time, spend 3 minutes writing something. You'd be surprised what you can write in even a minute or two. You can throw a couple of paragraphs down in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You can throw down even an idea. Or
Yeah.
if you say every day at lunch I'm going to write for 7 minutes of my lunch, you could get almost a page done a day.
Yeah.
Of something, if you focus. And we all know the brain works while you're not writing during the day. It's doing stuff behind the scenes. So once you get used to it, you can be productive with very little time. But
That's
you
so
have
true.
to want to do it.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's the
so
thing.
true.
You have to, and that's at the end of the day, people do what they really want to do.
Yeah, and they make time for the things that they want to make time for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's more important than catching up on your Netflix, then it will be.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Well, John,
wherever
I
else.
really appreciate you being a guest today. I've had so much fun talking with you, and
Likewise.
yeah, where's the best place people can get information about your work?
All things John are at www.johnpalisano.com.
Awesome, and thank you again, John. I really appreciate you being on the show. I've had so much fun today.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a blast. Thank you so much.